Okay, this is recording and the desktop audio is recording too. What the hell is this? Oh, voice mod. Okay. Hang on, can I quit that? Hello?
Hi.
Oh, the messenger parade of every single device sending the
Ah,
signal at the same time happened. Can you hear me okay?
right. Um, I think it's a bit quiet, but hold on, I might be able to fix it on my end.
It's a
I
bit
think I know what it
quiet.
is.
I'm not
Hold
sure.
on. Yeah, I should be okay now.
Okay, so I installed, this is for work, if you can believe, I installed a voice mod. So that's the voice changer, which makes you sound like a chipmunk. Most common people use that, or because apparently chipmunks talk and they have high pitched voices, and lots of other things. And it's actually pretty good. I'm impressed with it so far. Uh, but if I close voice mod and just get rid of it from the taskbar, then my microphone doesn't work. And I haven't quite got the schema in my brain to get it to work afterwards. So voice mod is on, but I have disabled all the effects. So hopefully I don't sound like a chipmunk.
Okay, now you just sound normal to me. It would,
Okay.
if you did sound like a chipmunk, it would be the first thing I mention.
Okay.
Or anything
Because I
else.
actually I had a meeting online and I had a robot voice and no, sorry, it wasn't robot voice, it was auto tune singing. And I didn't realize it was on because I don't hear it. And my colleague just immediately said, "Yeah, you sound like you're singing everything." Yeah.
Oh,
So before the boss came in, though, I made sure it was off.
right. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
I can't say it didn't happen. Right.
So it's not been. I was just going to say it's not been too long since we recorded the last episode. I don't think. So
No,
it's actually
we've
quite
been
a short gap.
yeah. So long may it continue as long as we've got things to talk about.
Yeah.
But I've we well, the crazy time has come to an end, I believe, or is coming to an end over here. But so this is just in my personal life.
Yeah.
But over the summer, we've got a trip to England, which is going to be very nice.
Yeah.
We've got doing some sightseeing in Poland, so we'll be visiting some other cities, cities I've never been to. It's like I lived in Britain, in England specifically, practically all my life, almost all my life, save for 3 or 4 years of my entire life. And even though, okay, so I was born and raised near London, and until the age of about 15, anything north of Luton, that was just like the wilderness. I didn't know. I If someone asked me where Sheffield was, I would say I don't know, somewhere there, somewhere up north.
Yeah.
I just knew that when England ended, Scotland began
Yeah.
at some point. That's all. That's the kind of geography I knew of Britain. But anyway, as I got older, I moved slowly further up north, and I realized that people do actually have souls, and they are actually nice.
Yeah.
Uh, so that I've definitely felt this, that the further north you go, the nicer people are.
All right.
Just in general.
Well, that's interesting.
Do you not feel that way?
I I don't know. It's never really occurred to me. I mean, I've
Hmm.
been to London a few times, and I've thought nothing of it really.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, like I said, I was born and raised just near London. Then I lived in Rugby for 2 years, so that's not actually far from where Mule and Hock live. They live in
Yeah.
Nuneaton, which is a stone's throw away. And then then I went to university in Leeds, so I kind of made my way further up north.
I thought you went to university in Russia.
Yes, I had 1 year. I had 1 year in Russia, so
Right.
I studied German and Russian. German and Russian studies is called philology, so just learning about the culture, history, literature, and language. Um, Yeah, so I lived in Moscow for 1 year in 2012, 2013. And
Yeah,
oh boy, reading the news about it now, it has changed so much. Obviously for the worse.
yeah, yeah,
Just the sheer. I just recall when I lived there, I just knew there was a big bad in the Kremlin, and he was an arse, and everyone had to just get on with him. But now there is no freedom of speech. There is no chance. If you go out on a street at the wrong time and a police officer thinks that you might be protesting the government, then they
yeah,
have the power to lock you up.
yeah, and that's exactly what's been happening.
Yeah, and worse still, actually, the year that I was there, they passed the homosexual propaganda laws, which was again
Yeah,
that was just a tool. That was just a free pass for police brutality and for just locking anyone they wanted up.
yeah,
So it's just been getting worse and worse over there.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get to the point that yeah, I've never been to Scotland, for example. I've never been to Ireland, even though I lived on in Britain all there that whole
Right.
time. Have you done much traveling in and around Britain, the British Isles, Ireland?
You know, within this last decade, I've hardly traveled at all.
Hmm.
I have like gone on like family holidays to like Spain and Ibiza and all that. And I've been to New York once. But in terms of the UK, um, I've been to London a few times. I've been to Scotland. I've been
Hmm.
to a few places, but not not loads. I'm not much of a traveller, all
Hmm.
things considered.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I don't know. I think I traveled kind of coincidentally because I'm not somebody who plans great journeys. Like loads of people took a gap year, but after finishing school and going to university because they wanted to travel, they wanted to experience something new. No, I didn't.
Yeah,
I just didn't really know what to do with myself, so I thought, yeah, university, go for it. That my university actually included loads of travel, so I lived in Russia for a year or 10 months, and I lived in Germany for 3 months, 3.5 months.
right.
That was just something I was forced to do, really. I don't know if I
So
would have done it of my own free will.
I know you say you're Russian, you're fluent in Russian, so you're fluent in German as well.
Ich glaube schon. I think so.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
I
I
did
think
like,
so.
yeah, I mean, as you know, my German knowledge is my GCSE,
Yeah.
and that's it. And that was however many years ago that was.
Your German's probably better than my brother's. My brother is just really proud that he can say Ich habe lange braune lockige Haare in that accent. So I've got
I have
long
brown
brown.
hair,
Yeah,
curly hair.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one. Um, yeah, I actually had a job interview recently. That was quite funny. That was quite an experience. So I just finished work. I got into the car and I got a call saying that, oh, I'm calling from such and such a company. Do you have 10 minutes for a like an like the first phase of the job interview? They just wanted to know some more information about me, I think. This wasn't actually a test to see if I'd be a good employee.
Yeah.
But I think they wanted to get some basics down, and they were talking to me in Polish the entire time, and they said, please don't be alarmed because at some stage there will be a question in English, and we will tell you ahead of time that there is going to be a question in English. You'll have a chance to prepare yourself. And obviously, I don't know. When I speak Polish, I don't really have I have a regional accent. I don't have like an Englishman trying to speak Polish. And so I said, okay,
Yeah.
I'll do my best. And we got to the question in English, and I replied in some kind of silly idiom. Uh, I can't remember what I said, but it was just like an idiom, and I don't think she understood entirely what was going on. But yeah,
Right.
it got to the second stage, and I also had my main interview lasted about an hour, and that was half in German, and so that was the first time I actually used the language for almost 8 years. Yeah.
Do you think, or rather, it would just be like, I suppose you know the answer rather than thinking it, but do you think your ability to speak other like multiple languages so well is down to just a skill that you have, or just down to, or is it more down to exposure?
That's a really difficult question because, okay, I have two older brothers. I may have mentioned before in streams or during these calls. I have two
Yeah,
older brothers, and they don't really care for languages. Even though we had the same parents and the same grandparents who taught us Polish, living in England, we were taught Polish as children. We all have some degree of we all understand Polish. We all can speak Polish, and I think write in Polish. But my brothers, for example, have no desire to learn languages. Really, they're not interested at all. One brother lived in Poland quite a long time, so his level of Polish is quite good. The other brother didn't. He lived in England practically his whole life. I think in total he may have lived in Poland less than a year in throughout his entire life, and his Polish is actually quite limited. So he struggles a bit, and so that kind of puts a line through the idea that it's just through exposure, because I think you have to have some either interest in it or some, like you said, natural ability in order to
yeah,
excel. But I think the biggest difference is, I don't know, I was kind of always interested in languages. I remember the first time I saw a phone, a mobile phone. My dad had a Nokia, some kind of Nokia, I think. The first phone I ever had was a Nokia 3310, like the famous one, simply because my
yeah.
dad got an upgrade. My brothers already got phones from my mum, and so my dad wanted to treat me to something, so he gave me his old one. And of course, the 3310 was a beauty of a phone. But of course, the first thing I did was I changed the language to German, even though I was in primary school. I didn't have German yet, but I changed the language to German for some reason.
See, I always think to myself that my first phone was a 3310, but then when I look up like images of 3310, it's it's recognizable of being of that time for sure, but
Hmm.
it's definitely it's different from the one I had, because the one I had, and I did find at one point, I can't remember exactly what series it was, but it was bigger, it was quite tall, and the border around the screen where it says Nokia at the top part,
Hmm.
it sort of had like a slant to it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Uh, well, I know my brothers had the phone that my brothers had. That was like a really tall one, so it had a tiny screen like they all had, but it
yeah,
had like a really big forehead. If you get what I mean. So it
yeah,
might have been the same that you had, really. 'Cause I think
maybe.
I think you're the same age as my oldest brother. So
I don't know
uh
how old your brother is.
he is 89. So you're a tad older, right?
Okay, okay. I thought you were joking. Okay, you mean 1989. For a second, I thought you were joking, saying he's 89 years old.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. No, no,
yeah,
no. No, I'm talking about years. Sorry, my bad.
yeah, yeah. I was born in 88, so I'm a bit older.
Yeah. Uh, but it's entirely possible that you got mobile phones at the same time. I don't know. My parents weren't actually that interested in technology, all things considered.
Maybe.
In any case, yes, I experimented with languages from a very young age. I really enjoyed just seeing German words. I don't know why I was fascinated with German, thinking about it now.
Yeah. I wonder. I wonder if any of it's to do with sort of just your own ability to recognize patterns. Because I think you sort of do that when you look at foreign words. If you don't understand, like foreign languages, if you don't understand what the words mean, you can sort of still see a pattern like, ooh, this letter is being used more often and it's only used next to this one, things like that.
Well, that's actually, I think that's how loads of fictional languages work. So recently, uh, recently I was looking something up for Skyrim, and I was looking at the shouts. So these are words written in the dragon language or whatever, and it's basically English just with different words. So, for example, the words like a, an, and the, these are articles. That's the word, what they're called articles in linguistics.
Yeah.
They don't exist in in many other languages, like Polish, for example. People don't use them. They're not used nearly as often. And
All right.
it's strange that when people invent languages, they obviously use the language that they're most familiar with. So I think when the Skyrim fictional language was used, they just used English as a base. They just changed the words around. But when you see this fake language and you see letters being repeated in certain ways, like if there is a very short word made up of one letter and it's used before slightly longer words, then you think, oh, so this probably means a because afterwards it's a noun. So it's like a
Yeah.
dragon or a, I don't know, chest or something.
Yeah. I mean, I did I tell you about my albums project that I do?
Albums project.
Yeah, I guess I haven't.
Tell me.
Well, since it's sort of like this music quest that I've been on. So I started in September of 2020, and what I do is that every month I pick out 5 albums that I don't know, or at least I don't know them from start to finish, and I listen to each of them about 5 or so times.
Hmm.
Um, just to sort of like in a way, I guess, broaden my horizons, but also to just to it's just nice to find more music that I like, even if it's very similar to the style of music that I already know that I do like. And one of the ones I listened to in May, just gone, was in Spanish. So I didn't understand it, but I sort of picked up like little bits here and there of like little patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. That's you I'm sure you'll notice that, especially in Spanish music, because it's really, I don't know, it sounds really, it's a cliche, but it's very passionate. So you might hear the word el fuego every now and again, which is the fire. And
Yeah.
you pick out words like that all the time.
Oh, there is literally a track on it called Fuego y Medo.
Yeah, so you're actually really bold because I don't listen to music. I mean, I listen to music. I listen to the same music I always listen to, so I have a very limited scope. And then every now
Yeah,
and again, somebody will show me a piece of music, or I'll have to play it because I'm in their company. I have to listen to it, sorry, because I'm in their
yeah,
company. But it will permeate through this very thick cell wall that I have around my musical taste or my music repertoire, let's say. And then it will be adopted. But usually I avoid new music like this stink. I can't bear it.
well, what I find is that in most cases, I always feel awkward, like if someone says like, "Oh, check this out," because in my mind, every if I've not heard it before, almost everything that people like sounds just generally average, and
Hmm.
it's very hard for me to form an opinion. But like the purpose of this whole project that I'm doing is like, if I listen to something multiple times, and obviously I'm picking out the albums myself with a few like suggestions from people here and there, but the whole point is if I make myself listen to it 5 times or 6 times or 7 times maybe, then it's got a different effect because of the exposure that I have to it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really can't relate to that, I'm afraid. I understand that how I do things is really, really strange.
Okay.
Well, just how I go about listening.
Right.
That's kind of it. I don't want to embarrass myself any further. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't have the issue of so when somebody shows me a piece of music, it's not so much that not that I form an impression. Of course you have to form an impression, but I don't often perceive that new music as bad. I'm far more comfortable listening to the music that I already know. I kind of see it like somebody who just doesn't like traveling. I mean, there's new stuff elsewhere, but I'm kind of comfortable where I am.
Yeah. Well, I've actually found quite a few. I mean, some of it's been from like bands that I've already kind of known, and there's been a couple where it's like I've not really known them, and it's like, well, I really like this. But of course, there's been a few where it's just like, oh, no, this is awful. Like I can't remember a single. It's like I think there's a couple albums where I'm thinking because I've passed like 100 albums on this thing now,
Hmm.
but there's a few of them where I think to myself, I cannot remember a single thing. I can't remember a single track, a single sound. I could just like just a general like droning noise goes on when I try to think about it.
Do you ever go back to music that you listened to when you were younger and you just really think, how on earth did I listen to this? This is dreadful.
No, I don't think I did.
No?
No, do you do that?
Uh, Occasionally I'll find like a piece of music that is, and I'm not talking like agadoos, things that you had to listen to when you were a kid.
Oh
I'm talking
yeah.
mainly things that you actually chose to listen to when you were a child, but now you couldn't bear listening to. I think it's quite limited actually with me. Um, just today, in preparation for today, I listened to some Gorillaz, the original Gorillaz album, and that is heavily uh, I I don't know, it's just my childhood in a nutshell, really. But there is some music when I was in my, I don't know, formative years, I think you could call it. I remember my brother loaded up an iPod for me, or an iPod, or my phone, my one of my dumb phones back then, with all sorts of music that he listened to. Because generally, that's how I had new music. I had new music through him. And Enter Shikari was quite big back then. So they are metal, screamo, that kind of thing. That was very popular back in the day.
Yeah.
And there are some tracks which are really fantastic, some tracks that are really even beautiful, I think. But others are unbearable. It's just noise. And I just think, how on earth could I have listened to this?
I was shown back in the day,
Back in the
someone
day.
back in the day, someone someone sent me an Enter Shikari song. It's the only Enter Shikari song I think I've ever heard, and it's "Okay, Time for Plan B."
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I thought it's all right, I guess.
Okay.
But it's one of those things, and I suppose this leads into our topic. It's something that I don't really think about much, but it's got like an association with it. Like there's a few songs like that,
Mm-hmm.
that nostalgic feel.
Mm-hmm. So is nostalgia for you childhood mainly? Does it take you back to your childhood, or is it more recent as well? Do you feel nostalgic for things that you've done, a week ago or a year ago?
I can do. You know, I was uh I was talking to someone earlier today, and I was saying that I told her that we were going to be doing one of these episodes, and she said to me like, "Oh yeah, you feel." I mentioned it was about nostalgia, and she said, "Oh yeah, because you said you feel nostalgia over recent things." And it's like, yeah, I do. I do find nostalgia can come in many forms, and nostalgia over recent things, it's it's mostly like the association, like it is with a lot of things, like just nostalgia in general. It's just this idea of, or I was playing this game, or I was listening to this music, or I was watching this YouTube channel or whatever, and it was hot, or it was like winter, or just just the amalgamation of those things
Hmm.
coming together.
Okay. Yeah. So would you say it's necessarily has to be a positive experience? So is nostalgia just positive, or are you thinking more along the lines of just associations? So your memories are associated with either weather patterns or temperatures even, or music.
Well, because I had a quick glance through your notes, and
Hmm.
one of the things that stood out to me was you were talking about something that was nostalgia, but it wasn't like a happy memory, but you
Yes.
still feel the nostalgia.
Yes. So I
I
can I can
definitely,
talk about that if you'd like.
yeah. Well, I definitely have that.
Yeah, so this is actually really interesting. So the nostalgia is triggered. This is the first point of nostalgia for the evening. The first point of nostalgia is triggered by the album Eminem Relapse. I think in Mr. Eminem's own estimation, the Relapse album was his weakest, or one of his weakest. It's just very vulgar, very violent. I don't know. Uh, I think loads of young boys are interested in it. Uh, at least where I grew up, it seemed to be quite prevalent. Uh, but the I don't know. Okay, as with hindsight now, I wouldn't listen to this, but whenever I do hear a track from this nostalgia triggers, and it just, yeah, I have a scene that plays in my mind of driving in my brother's car. My brother's driving me home from school or something. The music is playing, and for some reason, this is positive. This experience is positive, and I don't know why,
Yeah,
but the nostalgia is there. It's positive. But even though now I look back at the time in my life, the broad, let's say, time, so a period of a couple of months. So these were the months leading up to my GCSEs. Was extremely negative. It was terrible, and the music is quite bad as well. And the music doesn't actually evoke positive emotions itself because it's horrible. It's the theme of the whole album is rather dreadful. Uh, and but for some reason it's positive, and I can't explain it.
yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I have a memory, and I've actually got like another memory to sort of compare and contrast this to, that's like on the complete opposite side of the scale, I suppose. But these two songs that give some nostalgia for me. One of them is the, and I've mentioned this a few times on Mule streams, I think, the Japanese version of Real Emotion from Final Fantasy X-2, right?
Okay.
Very silly song, very, very happy, very boppy and everything. Um, but it was a hard time of my life. Um, I was struggling quite a lot mental health wise, and it's I remember things like being on the family computer and being on MSN and just like the Windows XP interface and everything. And I remember having the Unlimited Saga game, which wasn't a very good game, but it came with like a demo of Final Fantasy X too, and it had the demo was like a video demo, and it had that song playing. And even though it was a horrible time, my brain remembers it with an element of fondness. So
Hmm.
that's, and I think that is like exactly like the thing you were talking about.
Yeah.
And the other example I have was a couple of years earlier than that. Is if you take a song that's completely different, um, Crawling by Linkin Park, right?
Okay.
Now, I used to go to this childcare centre when I was younger, and I think it was 2001 because I think that album came out like towards the end of 2000. Actually, I did look it up to try and line up this memory at one point. Um, and I went to this childcare centre, and I really enjoyed it there. I had a lot of friends. You know, we had like the kids who were aged like within my age bracket. So at the time, it was like between 9 and 12 or something. We, we had like our little room. We had like a pool table, and we had a couple of games consoles, and it was really fun. And I really, really, I mean, I did get bored a lot when I was there, but there's a lot of like fondness there. And the song "Crawling" by Linkin Park, the tone of that song is just like, oh, depressive. It's so like aggressive, and everything's terrible and everything. But in my mind, it's a happy song because
Hmm.
of the association.
Well, I think you're right. I think it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually matter what the song's about. But I don't know if I remember this correctly, but I'm trying to picture that song, so I'm sure I listened to it as well. And Linkin Park in general had a very, I don't know, very emotional. And I think a lot of
Yeah,
people who listened to it, I think when we were kids, a lot of people who listened to it were, I don't know, they were trying to make sense of what it means to be, what it means to exist. In as far as a child can, as far as a child can approach such a question, and Linkin Park is kind of like an outburst of emotion, and maybe that's why it was conducive to these kinds of thoughts.
maybe. But again, um, at the time, comparing those two songs, despite them being very different in terms of style and how the style is completely opposite to the emotion that it brings out in me when I think back to it.
Hmm.
Um, Real Emotion. I liked that song when I was younger. Now with Crawling, I didn't really like it that much at the time. I like it a lot more now, looking back, and I was like, yeah, that's a pretty decent song. But I remember at the time it was just weird, and I just thought, oh, this is funny because of how weird it is.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking, it's actually all right.
Hmm. But do you feel it means more to you now than it used to?
I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe you didn't attach so much emotion, or you didn't have as much of a connection to the song before, whereas now you
Maybe.
do. It could also be that I'm sorry, I'm speculating. It could also be that as you got older, you were able to understand the song a bit more, and now it kind of makes more sense.
Uh, I mean, that's probably true,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't think that that would change how I value
Hmm.
the song
Okay.
particularly. So there is one thing that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, and I suppose we've sort of just talked about that similar sort of we sort of touched upon it, but this is something that I really, really wanted to make sure that I mentioned. Um, and contrasting two memories that I have. And I think if I was to describe the most intense sense of nostalgia that I've ever had, it just hit me out of complete nowhere. I was I was trawling through like a load of old files and everything that I had, and sometimes you find something and you're like, oh, I remember that, oh, and you sort of like cringe a bit.
Hmm.
Well, in 2008, I recorded a video which um like incredibly bad quality. I would have been 19 at the time. It was like really terrible quality. It was on like one of those cheap webcams, and it was me. I had like an extension, like a USB extender or whatever it was, so
Hmm.
I could move it around. And I was like, I'm gonna show you around my room and all the games I've got and stuff like that, right? And I just thought to my, I was looking at it, and I was doing the whole thing of like, like, oh, cringe, cringe, because you do that when you think about things you do with your younger self. But one part was I had a box on the floor with a TV in, and I mentioned that, well, I don't have a PS3 yet. I got a PS3 later that year, but I said I don't have a PS3 yet. But I got this new TV, but there's a problem that the PS2 games look terrible on it. So I've had to hook up my old CRT back up, and this has just been sat on the floor. And I just got this rush of nostalgia. Like,
Hmm.
I remember that problem that I had
Hmm.
of this TV that I couldn't use. And I was just brought back to 2008, just so intensely.
Hmm.
And that's not a particularly like, it's not a nice memory. It's not like a fond thing of like having a TV that doesn't work. But um, it was
You were
just,
just transported back.
yeah, it was just a thing that like came out of nowhere. And I was thinking today, I was thinking about comparing that to another memory I have about something that's considered to be, and I suppose we could talk about like how nostalgia is marketed and all that. But
Hmm.
I was thinking about an early memory of mine where I would have been 5, 6, maybe, and my uncle, who would have been about 13, 14 at the time, I think. He had a Mega Drive, and we when we went to like my grandma's house, sometimes, not always, but a couple of times, I'd be allowed to play on his Mega Drive, and so I'd go and I'd play Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog became like a big obsession of mine as a kid. It was like, oh, Sonic is amazing, and everything I cared about was just rooted in Sonic the Hedgehog.
Hmm.
Now, do I have nostalgia over playing Sonic in that house? I do. I definitely do. But I think what hampers that memory is that Sonic the Hedgehog is such a big franchise, and those early games are so prominent. I have since played played those games on an emulator and on like the Sonic Ultimate Collection on the GameCube, and then I had a Sega Mega Drive Collection on the PSP, and there was the Ultimate Mega Drive Collection on the PS3, and it's sort of to the point where yeah, I do have those fond memories of playing those games, but at the same time, it's sort of like the fact that Sonic the Hedgehog is like as a brand uses this as like nostalgia. Like, oh, it's Green Hill Zone music. Oh, it's Chemical Plant Zone music. It's there's so much exposure to it that I've had that nostalgic feeling is dampened to where just being exposed to Sonic, just like Green Hill Zone, doesn't really do anything for me nostalgia wise.
Hmm. I mean, I played Sonic I played a very limited amount of Sonic, and I have maybe for the first zone, like you just said, the Green Hill Zone. The Green Hill Zone, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Sonic One.
Yeah, so maybe I feel that slightly, but no, as I don't feel it at all. But I understand how you I understand what you're saying. That it's just been it's the image that comes to mind is when you have, I don't know, a pair of jeans that you've worn for so many years and now they're barely blue anymore. They're kind of white 'cause you've all the color's been washed out. They're still jeans, but it's not the same.
Yeah. So, do you have any specific uh like do you so do you have any I was supposed to say do you have any specific like thoughts or examples, but I suppose you could use examples, but do you have any explicit any like thoughts on nostalgia that you'd want to like get into?
Well, I had um I have a strange memory or a strange feeling of nostalgia, and that is not necessarily, oh, it's of a place and a time, I suppose, but it's of a time where I didn't actually play video games because I was too young and I wasn't allowed. Because my older brothers thought that I would just ruin everything, and so, for example, they would play Gran Turismo single player, and they would give me the controller and say that I was controlling all the other cars, and that
Yeah,
would satisfy me because I was a kid and I didn't know any better. Uh, but
I was thinking of that story.
yeah, in any case, so this trigger is the original Gorillaz album, and in particular the Clint Eastwood refix song, and that just takes me back to the days where we had just got a PS1, I believe. Um,
Yeah.
so this would have been we got a PS1 quite late, I think. In any case, especially the game Dukes of Hazzard, I have nostalgia for the game cover. That's how limited my exposure to that game was. I have nostalgia for the game cover. I don't actually until I looked it up, I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I didn't actually know what that game looked like on screen actually being played. I had no idea what the gameplay was. I didn't know. Obviously they had the car, the big orange one, the long one, the one that looks like a barge. They had that one, and it had like a number on the side. Is I don't know if it was O1 or whatever, but that was from obviously from the TV show. But that's just it. I hear the music, I think of Dukes of Hazzard, and I think that was an amazing time. That must have been an amazing game. But I actually have no idea what it was like. And obviously, well, not obviously, it turns out that that game wasn't that good, and and really this whole sense of nostalgia just crumbles when I actually take a moment to think about it. But that's just it. I mean, there are certain things that I feel nostalgic about, and I've picked them apart, and I can see why I am being lulled into a false sense of insecurity. I really do think nostalgia isn't always a good thing, or can be quite dangerous.
Right.
So I'll borrow what I've written because I suppose it will work. Like a siren, it tempts us to try to relive or return to a place with happy associations. So we're kind of lured towards the rocks, and then if you get too close, you crash, and you can crash maybe. Uh, Basically, uh, sometimes I think well, we definitely looked into that right at the beginning. The negatives were more the negatives, the experiences, the time was more negative than it was positive. And from a distance, when you think about the nostalgia, it's all well and good, but when you get closer, it's a bit more it's a bit more nuanced. There's more to it than that, and often, in my case at least, it turns out that I should enjoy nostalgia all I can. Basically, I think it's just free good feelings, free good emotions. But at the same time, don't get too close.
I actually also have nostalgia for that song, Clint Eastwood.
Oh yeah.
It's not much. It's just the childcare centre I mentioned before, where they were playing at
Hmm.
Lincoln Park. I remember that song was big at around that time, so I think they might have played it there a few times.
Hmm.
But it's one of those songs where I sort of remember it as the song that, like, one of the songs that was playing in the car on the way there, as
Uh-huh.
well as "It Wasn't Me" by Shaggy. That was the other
Oh
song.
dear, that was
Yeah.
everywhere. Oh
Yeah.
dear. I've just been taken back to school discos and things like that, and Shaggy's playing, and you just, oh dear. What a
Yeah.
song to be played when 8-year-olds are pretending to drink alcohol and trying to act like adults, but they're 8 years old, obviously, and they're at the school. The best thing about the school disco was trying to sneak out of the main hall and walk around the corridors in the evening. That was great. Anyway, I have some examples. I would like us to leave Final Fantasy VIII for the end because I think that's probably going to be the most
Okay.
the most overlap that we have, the most we can talk about. We can go through these quite quickly. I can just describe the nostalgia and perhaps what I learnt from the nostalgia. And if anything comes to mind, just go ahead. So here
Okay.
I'll too long didn't read everybody into this. There are 4 examples, I believe. So I'll start with Crisis Core. For some reason, I was inspired by Top 500 Games by Velocity 11 on the YouTubes. I
Yes.
was inspired by that, and I actually my exercise was to see if I've even played 500 games, and ignoring. So there's going to be some clicking, I'm afraid. So I've got a clicky mouse, but ignoring kind of games that are dreadful, that are like mobile games and things like that. Actual games that I would consider games. I have played 183, I believe. So I've got the list here. 182, I'm sorry. And for some reason, top of my list was Crisis Core. When I assembled this list, and this is of all the games that I assembled, Crisis Core was at the top. And
Right.
I struggled to figure out why. Why did I believe Crisis Core was my favorite game of all time? And I think nostalgia has a lot to say about this. So I played Crisis Core when I was at school. At the end, so I think I must have been in year 11, because I remember a friend lent me his chipped PSP, or his modded PSP, and he had Final Fantasy 9 and Crisis Core on it. Um, so that's when I played it, and I really enjoyed it. It was vastly different to what I was used to, and generally speaking, I'm the kind of person that if something is vastly different from what I'm used to, I don't enjoy it, and I try to avoid it like the plague. But for some reason, even though Crisis Core didn't play like Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII, which I had played, I still enjoyed it. Uh, and this is a bit embarrassing, but I can tell you about some of the scores I gave it.
Okay.
So I gave a score, a game score, and then a personal score, and then there was a combined score. So the game score, which took into account visuals, music, gameplay, story, longevity, how long you could play it, how easy it is to get the game today, and how consumer friendly it was. That was what I considered should go into the game score. The nostalgia was next to that. And back when I made this list, I only gave it a 35 out of 40 for nostalgia. So it didn't get quite as much. And bear in mind, this isn't completely precise. I think I just went up in five, so I could have put the scale down a bit. But that's why it edged Final Fantasy VIII. When in reality, I don't think the game was all that good. Or wasn't as good as I imagined it was. I just think the emotion, Final Crisis Core, if anyone's played it, is like a kind of action role-playing game. There are some elements of Final Fantasy-ness in the gameplay, not too many, I don't think. HP there was a weird pachinko style slot machine that everyone hates.
Yeah.
But most of all, it just was a prequel to the Final Fantasy VII story, and I think that's what people enjoyed about it most. But for me, looking back on it, the most important part of it was the emotional ending. And it was extremely emotional for my teenage brain back then because I somehow had a massive attachment to it. It really did wrap the game up in a neat little bow, and it kind of has a nice little sad Japanese pop song at the end. And you see Cloud, and he's going to continue he's going to continue Zack's life and legacy and all that kind of stuff. And that was a game that really, really fed on, or it really took advantage of nostalgia for Final Fantasy VII, even though I wouldn't say I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII as much as I did others. And it kind of built on that. And right at the end of the game, watching the final cutscene and moving on from it and kind of leaving it behind, it had like a positive spin in my mind. And for some reason, I remembered that game to be far better than I think it actually was.
Right. Well, I think this sort of serves as an example of something that I was thinking about, and something that I would sort of just want to bring up and ask what your thoughts are.
Uh-huh.
But this idea of nostalgia being something that can be captured in something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you say, it captures your nostalgia of like Final Fantasy VII. What I find is that if something is designed to capture nostalgia, then it doesn't really work, because
Mm-hmm.
I think of nostalgia as sort of like a very personal thing. Like there was a time, I remember soon after getting Final Fantasy VII and VIII, I would play them downstairs in the back room. It was really cold. This was like during the winter. I'd be sat down. I'd basically have this like a rug just covering me, and because it was next to the kitchen, I'd occasionally just go and get like cups of hot chocolate, and I'd just keep like coming like back in to, get some hot chocolate, and I'd go back into the room, and I'd play some more of whatever it was I was playing, either Final Fantasy VII or VIII at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I have nostalgia for that, but that's my nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing that I like. They could do something with these games, like they could re-release them and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it might be like nostalgic for what it is, but because what they're doing has nothing to do with me being sat in the back room with a bit of hot chocolate and a rug on me, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't like translate to
I,
nostalgia in
f-
that same way.
I think the art of nostalgia is to trigger nostalgia in as many people as possible using as few tools as possible. Obviously,
Yeah,
if you bombard, say for example, take Final Fantasy VII. If you bombard everybody with every single aspect of Final Fantasy VII, just to make sure that anyone who has any nostalgia for Final Fantasy VII, just to make sure that will tickle their nostalgia bone, they
yeah,
then you'll come up with a very dry and boring game. But they know people have nostalgia for Aerith and the love story, if you could call it that. Yeah, love story, I should say. Final Fantasy VIII was a lot better. Wink, wink. Um,
yeah,
but they I think they just took certain things. I mean, nobody nobody seems to think back and really enjoy Kate Sith from Final Fantasy VII, for example, and that's why he didn't really. Reeve was there. Reeve was in Crisis Core, and his function in Shinra was kind of explored a little bit. But aside from that, they didn't bring Kate Sith back, probably because it wouldn't have made sense as far as the story's concerned, but also because people didn't like that very much. So I think they 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 picked and chose things that they figured would tickle people's nostalgia bone. And I think they did a good job with Crisis Core in tickling the nostalgia bone. It can happen that people do, um, companies do try to use nostalgia, and it just falls flat. It doesn't particularly
yeah.
work. So I
I mean,
know.
I suppose, like, Final Fantasy VII, it's a game that I've played so much, I've played under so many different contexts, that it's like that whole thing with Sonic the Hedgehog
Hmm.
again, where it's like there's no one particular nostalgia here. There's just me thinking back to individual like moments in time that I can do, but that's very much like a personal thing.
Yeah, I
If
really
if
wanted.
instead, yeah, if
Please
instead it
continue.
was like a game I'd play like once or a little bit, then maybe just seeing that game would trigger the nostalgia.
Hmm.
But just because it's something that I'm got so familiar with and played for so long, it's like my brain needs more to latch onto. But sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so moving, I think a natural progression from this is the the question of the remake of Final Fantasy VII. How do you feel about that? Firstly, did you play it? Because I don't think I ever asked you. And secondly, do you think that it was good in its own right from what you've seen, or do you think it was just like a very, 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 very small feather on a very long stick trying to tickle somebody's nostalgia? But I'm gonna keep saying that because I'm really enjoying that that analogy.
Yeah, I think it probably was a a very, very long feather, I suppose. But I've not played it. I played the demo, thought I couldn't get into it.
Hmm.
I didn't really understand like the controls. I mean, but saying that, the demo, like Final Fantasy 15, I would say is an okay game. It's pretty good. It's not terrible, but the demo for Final Fantasy 15 was awful.
Hmm.
Like running off that demo, I thought that was terrible.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't. The I feel like there's going to be a lot of people for whom games like Final Fantasy VII is very much a memory.
Hmm.
It's something that they grew up with. It was their first RPG, and then maybe they got a PS2 and they started playing maybe more RPGs, maybe other types of games.
Hmm.
But Final Fantasy VII is something that's stuck like in the back of their mind, and so when they see the remake come out, they see the trailer and they see all the little things, it's like it triggers all those memories. It's like, oh, it's that thing. Oh, it's that thing.
Hmm.
But I think for someone like me who's played it a lot more over the years and is like familiar, simply seeing like a high scale rendition of the reactor and the little playground in the slums,
Hmm.
it's nice to see and all, but it doesn't trigger like memories within my deep subconscious because they're actually a bit further into my conscious.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. So I think for this is often used in various circles that I'm a part of. Casuals. So for filthy casuals, it's for casual players, for casual gamers, for casual users of interactive media. The Final Fantasy VII is just like a milestone. It's something that they can recognize, but it's not something that they're intimately familiar with. And so returning to that thing isn't great. Or isn't,
So
or maybe not that it isn't great, it
yeah,
just it doesn't it's not as groundbreaking as like a connection to like um
yeah.
like a personal nostalgia, things that we were talking about before.
So here's something that I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about, but it sort of just come back to me. And I suppose this isn't as much to do with nostalgia, but just to do with memories. Although it is kind of nostalgia based. But do you ever have it where you get like this memory of something, and what you remember, you can't, given what you now know, you can't quite pin it down as to what your memory is referencing. And the example I use for this is when I was when I was very young, 5 years old, and back when I got my first Amiga, um, the second I believe it was the second game I ever played was Lemmings.
Hmm.
Now, this is I was just getting familiar with the games for the first time. Now, I remember Lemmings. You could play two players on it, and if you did, you both had your own like little. I presume you know how Lemmings
Yeah,
works.
you both had a cursor, is that what you're?
Yeah. So you
Hmm.
both had like your own starting bit, and there was a home for the lemmings to go, and you controlled, like you interacted with your own lemmings,
Hmm.
and you had to sort of get more lemmings through to the home than your opponent did.
Hmm.
Or maybe it was just cooperative. I don't remember.
Competitive lemmings. Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know if it was competitive or if it was cooperative or whatever it was,
Uh-huh.
but you basically you had to manage your own lemmings on different like parts of the screen. Now, I remember the first time loading up two players, it was different. It wasn't that. It was just the normal levels, but with two people controlling it. And I remember I sort of gained this understanding of I I don't know. Seems so weird now looking back, but I remember I got to a point where, and maybe I have other false memories that sort of supported this, but I remember thinking to myself, well, in games, the first time you play two players, it's different. After that, you choose two players, it's always the same. It's different for the first time, but it's always the same. Now that, looking back, that's just absolute nonsense. I'm thinking, of course that's not true. But what made me think that? I don't know.
I have no idea either.
Yeah.
That's strange.
And sometimes you try to like pinpoint things like could I have seen like when you learn and you know more things, it's like you try to pinpoint it. So given the information I know now, what could I have misinterpreted?
Hmm.
Like maybe I was just really young and I was just an idiot thinking I was doing two players, but I accidentally pressed one player and oh no, it is just the one player game, but me thinking it was two players.
Hmm.
So maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But that's like we're talking about like nostalgia in games. That is almost as early as it's going to get for me.
Uh-huh. Oh wow. Okay. Just briefly, this wasn't something I thought of. I think I do believe the Dukes of Hazzard memory is the earliest. Actually, no. Okay. If we're talking games, let's go back a little bit further. My parents had either an Amiga or a sorry, not an Amiga. Yeah, an Amiga or a DOS computer. And uh either way, I think it must have been DOS. Uh we had an educational game about a hamster who needs to connect loads of pipes. And that was my favorite. Not my favorite. That's my earliest memory. And again, this is I don't really feel much nostalgia. I don't get like this warm feeling about it, warm feeling connected to it. But it's just perhaps the earliest recollection. And obviously, I wasn't playing then; it was my brothers. again.
Yeah.
Just to tie off uh, Crisis Core, I
Yeah.
can't go back to it. Even even Final Fantasy 7, to be honest. I can't go back to Final Fantasy 7. I played it, I completed it. I actually completed it when I was at university. Before I'd never before my interactions with it were a lot more limited. But I can't I don't know, I've never had them. Okay, so with Final Fantasy 7 I never really had the motivation to go back to it. With Crisis Core, I tried, but I could only go for like an hour or so before I just decided, nah, I don't really want to. It's a nice game and all. I kind of accepted that the nostalgia is very powerful, but I still didn't want to play.
Yeah. Before, because have you got two more examples? Is that right?
I have two kind of well, I've got one example that I've got a fair bit to talk about, and then two more that are
Right.
tiny.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just say this quickly then.
Uh-huh.
Um, and this ties into something we talked about before about like creating games and stuff. I'll tell you one bit of music, game music, that makes me very nostalgic. And this is also an example of something that's very recent as well, so a recent nostalgia. So complete opposite end of the spectrum to Lemmings is the overworld music to Level Up Land 2. Like
Uh-huh.
I remember when you first played it, you were like, "Oh, this music is so ominous," right?
Mm-hmm.
And just the memory of having to like load it up and test it and do all these things. That music, that overworld music, is just embedded in my mind as like this is what the start of 2020 was like.
Uh-huh.
Just programming and playing and testing that game and stuff.
So what do you use it
Crazy.
for? So what do you use that music for? Because you often listen to video game music when you work, right?
Well, I was listening back to a previous episode. I remember I said that. Well, I haven't actually worked Level Up 93 for a while. I want to get back to it, but yeah, there was times where I would load up like a soundtrack, like Final Fantasy 8 or Rayman or something like that. And I don't really load up Level Up Land soundtracks. I mean, they're only like 5 minutes each, so
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be able to just put it on and leave it. Uh, so I don't really use like in that regard. I don't use it for anything outside of just it was just part of the game that I made.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what you mean.
Yeah. So well, um, yeah. Well, that answers my question. Do you listen to it
Right.
when you're while you're working or doing things? No, but it's just simply something that you remember.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I might like listen, like give it a listen, and I'll just be sent back to that time. Very. It's a very. I know. I know you said it's very ominous, but it's one of those ones where it's definitely not one of my favorite tracks that I've made. I definitely prefer like the battle themes and the overworld music for Level Band 1. But I think in terms of like nostalgia and just like how powerful it is in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, I would say it is the one of the biggest examples of that of music that I have made.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Right.
Uh,
So
well,
you could
okay. So
talk about your big example.
yeah. So this is a big example, not in the amount perhaps that I've got to talk about, but
Okay.
it's just kind of how important it is to me, perhaps. And this is something that was a big part of my childhood or growing up, and that's Delta Force Blackhawk Down. So this was a shooter game which was online on the computer. There were 50 people on one server, and it wasn't that you click a button and immediately you're playing against other players. No, you had to choose a server, and servers were had their own personalities. They had their own maps, and of course, the community was paramount. So you would join if you played on a server regularly, you would get to know the people, and you would get to know the maps. You'd get to know the culture, the rules. It was vastly different to what people who play shooting games experience now, I believe. I genuinely believe what kids experience now playing shooter games is vastly inferior. But I think this belief is shrouded in nostalgia, and I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you can help me pick it apart and see see if it is really a double-edged sword, if it really is quite dangerous. And I think this goes for any kind of community that you can be a part of. I was part of a server. I designed my own maps for the server. They were hosted, they were played on this server, and I got to know the people very well. I actually joined. I was younger than their minimum joining age. Their minimum joining age was 16, and I was, I think, 14 at the time. So of course I told them that I was 17 because reasons.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I had this feeling that I was fairly involved in everything that was going on. I didn't understand. I think they were all from Birmingham, really. Most of them were from Birmingham. Some were from Europe, and obviously I was just from outside London. And I had a lot of contact with the owner of the server because he also designed levels. And he gave me loads of tips and kind of helped me and always encouraged me. He wanted me to make more and more things so that he could host them. And he was generally very nice to me. Uh, and I think, so that was around 2007-ish, 2007, 2008. In 2012, when I was living in Russia, I, when I was living in Moscow, I, um, I got a message from him and I think his wife, because this was, MSN days. You have like a massive contact list, and everybody has everybody can connect to everybody else, and then Facebook obviously kind of took that role. That they were bringing the server back, and at that time I was working on a single player mod for that game, and I thought, fantastic! I could kind of marry the two. I could make a multiplayer mod, and it'd be fun and fantastic. And this guy was really, really excited, and he was, testing it with me and bug fixing and figuring out why things work and kind of, doing a what do you call it? Coming up with new ideas with me. And then one day, radio silence. Just everything was gone. The server was offline, where I was testing things, uploading things and testing them. That was offline. The website was offline. Nobody
Mm.
contacted anybody, and that was it. I was kind of just cut off from this world that I had invested myself in. And this was a point where I was actually spending a lot of my free time working on this thing, working on this mod. But looking back, I don't think I was such a big part of this guy's life, because I think our meetings would only ever be like at the weekend. It would only be for like an hour or so, if that, that he would kind of come online and help me. But I don't know, I attached just so much gravity to this whole interaction, and then it just died. Everything just quit, and it was kind of, uh, it was really, I don't know, it was really hurtful. And looking back on it now, do I want people to experience the same thing I experienced by getting involved with people that you have no idea who they are really, and you form a really strong emotional bond with them, and then something can switch, and then you realize that really you weren't so important in their life, that when they needed to change something, they didn't even tell you what was happening.
Well, it's definitely the type of thing that would stick with you,
Oh
isn't
yeah.
it?
So what if you're curious, what happened was, he was, so he kind of ran the server with his wife, and then from what I gather, he cheated on his wife. Their marriage broke down, and that was the cause of it. So obviously now, as an adult, I understand. Well, as I was an adult then, technically, but I was an
Yeah.
idiot. I was an idiot as well. But obviously, with hindsight, I'm more detached from the situation now. Absolutely, I'm like, geez, this game is nothing compared to your whole life, kind of being picked apart and breaking down. But it was very difficult. It was very difficult for me. And going back to that game, I feel nostalgia, and I feel nostalgia even for the servers and even for these people from Birmingham. But at the same time, it's just it can be very painful.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So, what do you think? What do you think about? Maybe you don't have too much of an experience, so this might not be particularly easy question for you to answer. But what do you think about this idea that a game could be okay? So we're getting into the territory of young children playing games because, of course, I was a minor when I was got involved with this community, and that going against their rules themselves. I just lied about how old I was. Um, but nowadays, games are very uh, it's people like playing multiplayer games. That's the trend I see, and I think developers find it easy. I think it's cheaper. It's easier to make a multiplayer game than it is to make a single player game because a single player game you have to think about all sorts of things. Uh, chiefly, coming up with a story, coming up with a not even that, coming up with interesting enough puzzles. Whereas if you just create in the realm of first person shooter games, especially, if you just create a 3D arena and make it interesting enough, like invest all your money in the way it looks, then you could probably sell it and you could probably make some money. And it's a very difficult thing to do, I think, to do with any sort of degree of finesse. Now, my question is, the trend I see generally is that the the interactions between players online in the realm of shooting games is it's very anonymous. So you may as well be playing against bots, really. It's uh it's used to be the case that you would go online and you'd join a server, like I said. But of course, is it better that people are saved this potential kind of problematic relationship? I think I got off quite lightly, all things considered, considering how bad it could have got. But is it a good thing that community servers aren't particularly big anymore? That people don't enter into this strange kind of relationship with random strangers online who are much older than you or potentially much older than you?
Right. Well, I think this is a very broad subject, and I think this whole community service thing is like a specific example of that because I didn't really play. I've never really played many games online, with the
Uh-huh.
exception, like as you know, Age of Empires 2, which I've been
Mm-hmm.
playing recently, and recently it is just a case of um I online load up ranked match,
Mm-hmm.
find somebody who has the same map preferences and of a
Yes.
similar rank, and then we just have a game and that's it. Pretty much all the time. I do remember there was a time when there was there was this whole thing with like clans going on, where
Mm-hmm.
people, but it might still be going on. I don't know. I don't keep up with it. But there was this whole thing with like these websites were dedicated to clans, and yeah, they had these rules like you have to have the name of this clan
Oh yeah.
in in your in your in your username, like at the start or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. That's normal.
Yeah,
So this
and
this this clan mentality is exactly what I'm talking about. So you join a clan,
yeah,
you join like they often call themselves families, but it's
yeah, and I remember I had a friend from school who played Age of Empires. Um, he maybe we were about the. I mean, he wasn't very good at the start, but I think eventually we got to around the same skill level.
mm-hmm.
And he was telling me about like this like online clan that he joined,
Mm-hmm.
and he was trying to like get me into it and everything. And I don't remember if I did, but I remember I wasn't particularly interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one day, like in school, he just randomly told me that the guy who ran the clan got cancer.
Oh wow.
It's like, yeah, that's like the extent of my memory of that. So when you were talking about the situation, uh, Blackhawk Delta Force, is that it?
Blackhawk down.
Yeah. Well, you Blackhawk down, Delta Force. That's something completely different.
Delta Force Blackhawk down. It's a long name.
Right. Okay.
BHD is what I usually shorten it to.
Right. Yeah. When you were talking about that, I just started thinking about
Mm-hmm.
like my friend who joined this clan,
Yeah.
and I think I don't know. it's one of those things where you don't think much of it at the time. You just sort of go with the flow
Hmm.
because it's part of the flow, but then it's so far like away from the flow that you really start to think about it in context of what it is. And I
Hmm.
do that with like when I think about like people who I used to talk to online and just like the forums I was
Uh-huh.
on and all that lot.
Yeah, I think
And
I think it
the
actually extends to that as well, to be honest.
yeah,
So it's not
and
it's
the
not just limited to video games, but I think I've steered us towards a topic that is vastly different from
yeah.
what we started in.
Yeah, that friend I made on that forum who ended up turning into a massive bigot. Yeah, I remember that.
Uh-huh.
You know, it is, but this is a nostalgic thing, isn't it? Because you're thinking back to your old self and the context of, you try to like relate it to like a
Yeah.
context that you're just not so closely tied to anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. It happened recently actually. Um this I got into level design for Unreal Engine 4 with a new game which is kind of like a spiritual successor to the old Delta Force titles. And I made a level, and I was invited by the owner of a community server. I mean, this game is very it's early access. It's kind of very limited in its scope right now and its reach to players. But there are already servers that exist, and people manage these servers, and I think they enjoy themselves there. But I was already asked by someone to join their clan, to join their community, like sign up on their website, have their little name of the clan in my username and all that kind of stuff. But I just, despite all the best intentions of the people there, I kind of avoid it. I don't want to be attached to that kind of thing at all. I really struggle with the idea of belonging to a community. And I think it's due to these memories, due to this kind of bad experience with it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to I mean, even like doing these episodes, like because it's something that involves not just me but another person, I sort of approach it with no obligations like mindset. So
Hmm.
say like if like I'm recording Level Up Land and all that, in my mind it's like right, I want to schedule it for this and every episode
Hmm.
has to be between this time and this time. But like with this it's just whenever we can both do it, then that's fine. However long it ends up being, that's fine.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah, and that's kind of my approach to this. Like now, I mean, with this level design, if he wants to use anything that I create, great, go for it. If you don't want to use it, fine. But I'm not gonna. I really don't want to commit myself to something and work really hard at it and experience what I experienced in the past.
Yeah, because it sort of becomes like an unpaid job.
Yeah, well, I wanted to move quickly on to something. I'll leave out talking about MotorStorm because I don't think I was going to talk about the PS3 game MotorStorm and that even though okay, I'm kind of talking about it now, aren't I? Well, even though I have like a nostalgic connection to MotorStorm, when I play the game, I don't really feel the nostalgia. I feel the nostalgia for the time when I just got a PlayStation 3 and MotorStorm was the only game I had. Well, that along with
Yeah,
Resistance Fall of Man. So
yeah.
that's that.
Well, that's me in Oblivion. I
Yeah.
got Oblivion when I got my PS3. It just makes me think of, getting my PS3.
Hmm. Oh, I have a lot. I think I have a lot of nostalgia for Oblivion.
Yeah.
But that's just simple nostalgia. I enjoy reminiscing
Yeah.
about it. Right, I want to talk about the FIFA series because I wanted to
Right.
respond to something that you said a while ago, and I don't can't remember if it was during one of these calls, I think, that you didn't understand how someone can say this FIFA was better than that FIFA.
Now, you sent me your notes, right?
Yeah.
And I was
Is
waiting
firstly
to get.
is this incorrect? My
I don't
recollection of what
know.
you said.
Like, I honestly can't remember what I said, what the context was, or
Uh,
if I said anything. I don't remember any of that. But I saw that you made a note saying that I didn't know how someone could say that one FIFA was better than another. Um, and I'm trying to think about like that objectively now, just like the pure matter
Yeah,
of the fact.
so I think the context was that you were talking about incremental changes and how someone can say this FIFA was the best FIFA when really the whole series as a whole, the series as a whole just has um, generally that has the same kind of features. There are teams, they're related to real world things, and there's a career, and there's online and blah blah blah. So it has every game
Right.
basically has the same features. And I think you were confused about why somebody would pick out one game as opposed to just talking about the whole franchise. So okay, it's coming back to me now. There was a list, or somebody said the best games, their top 10 games, and Madden '05 was their
Ah,
seventh favorite game or something, and you were confused because Madden '05, is it really that different from Madden '06? If Madden '05 was in fourth place, why isn't Madden '06 in fifth place, considering they're so similar?
okay.
Something
This
along
is
those
something.
lines.
Yeah, I'm remembering this now. I think, I think what my point. It wasn't so much that this game, these games are all very similar. So
Uh huh.
why aren't they all like together? It was just this idea of these. It was like the context with the games around it. So the idea of someone being like, right, so it's going to have this racing game at number 10, and maybe like this RPG at number 9, and
Uh
then this particular Madden game in this place.
huh.
And then, and then it's like, okay, so this particular Madden, say if someone's doing like a top 100 list,
Uh huh.
and they've got like one Madden game at number 7, and no other Madden games in the rest of the list, then it's like they're saying, right, well, this 90 odd games are all worse than this one particular Madden game, but better than all the rest of them. And I just thought that was kind of weird. It
Mm.
wasn't that there's this particular one. It wasn't that people were picking out a particular one that they thought was best, because I mean that's just going to happen anyway, isn't it?
Uh huh. Well, can
So
I show you? I would like to show you. There's going to be some clicking involved now. My
okay,
I'm gonna redact a lot of this because I don't want to embarrass myself in public.
okay.
I'll send you a screenshot so you can share this at the end as well. I think. Uh, I'll show you some of my favorite games, and I'll show you where I positioned all the FIFA games that I played. So
Okay.
I think this might be quite funny for you, and maybe
So
this.
is this just for my eyes, or is this for the?
Well, first of all, I'm trying to find. Hang on, sorry. This is really really unprofessional.
It's all
Okay,
right.
so there we go. Let's hide all of these. Okay, now we go. Let's hide this. So this actually isn't so embarrassing, but ah, okay, bollocks, balls. Sorry, pardon my French. Uh,
It's like
this is
I'm
gonna be
just, ima-
funny.
I'm just imagining like loads of sensor bars over whatever this thing is.
Yeah, yeah. Hide
Probably like a
row.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, it is a spreadsheet.
Yeah, a spreadsheet with loads of sensor bars over it.
I'm just hiding rows of this spreadsheet just so that you
Right.
can
Okay.
kind of see what on earth was going on in my head a few years ago. I have this. Okay, so this is connected. Before I get on to showing you what it is I want to show you, and before you die of laughter,
Uh,
uh, the
Okay.
I have this sense of. I think it's really really healthy, to be honest. Whenever I look back on who I was for 5 months ago, or a year ago, or 2 years ago, I just facepalm and think, what an idiot. I have this all the time, and this list that I made, I think about it now. I made this in 2018, I think, or 2007. No, 2018. I made it. So at the beginning of first half of 2018, around the time that I watched your top 500 game series, and I played Level Up Land 1, and this I made, and I just think Fran from 2018 was an absolute moron. That's what
Yeah.
that's how I seem to imagine myself. What an idiot.
Yeah,
What
I
an
do get that, by the way. I do get that. Sometimes it's like something that I said like a few weeks ago or whatever. I think, what an idiot.
and okay, I'm gonna leave something very embarrassing, but I wonder if you're gonna pick up on it.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's for my eyes.
This is for your eyes and for everybody's eyes, so everybody gets to laugh at Fran.
Okay, okay.
All right.
I'll be sure to put it up.
So firstly, I'll take a
Right.
screenshot now and I'll send it to you
Okay.
so that you can see. How do I do a window snip? Here we go. Window. Okay. Now how do I get to miss? Oh, I'm not very good at this. Here we go. Okay. So this is what you should be able. Oh, pants. No, you don't see everything. Sorry,
Okay.
that was useless.
So not that one.
That screenshot is useless. Sorry. I'm
Okay.
It's okay. Sorry, just a mess. I'm just a mess right now. I'm really worried about this now because I'm there. This should suffice. So let me get it back up on my screen, and you can have a good laugh at Fran.
Right, okay. So this is your
This is a redacted top 183. No, top 184 games.
right. Okay. So you just there's loads of like hidden rows, I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
so
So it's
I've
just
hidden rows so that it's basically I wanted to show you where all the FIFAs were and how
ah.
why did I put FIFA 19 between Tekken 3 and Tekken 2? I don't understand. Yeah, everyone join in. This is a really good have a laugh at Fran moment.
No, what's making me laugh is that I did this exact same thing,
Really?
right? Yeah, yeah. Warriors, Warriors Orochi 1 and 2, right? Very similar games. Okay. Like basically they run off the same engine, exact same graphics. There's like different levels in each of them, and there's a few like quality of life changes between them. So in Warriors Orochi 2, you can because within both games that you switch between characters by pressing like L1 and L1, and in Warriors Orochi 2, for example, you can do it whilst riding a horse, but in the first game you can't. And there's just like a few like little things here and there. And on my top 500 list, I had Warriors Orochi, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Warriors Orochi 2. So, so it's like, but I think that's an even like bigger example
Yeah.
of
You're actually able to substantiate that claim. That why was it nestled between the two? Because there was a change in gameplay.
I don't know. I think in my mind I'm thinking like the these games are so similar to each other, but in quality, I was thinking to myself, well, they're also very similar in quality to Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So I think that's just sort of how it flowed. But yeah, I do know what you mean. Yeah. FIFA 19, FIFA 19 between Tekken 2 and Tekken 3. It's just, yeah, but I mean, like, I did that, and it's just all very.
So did you
problematic.
fix it? Did you fix it when you went to do your final top 500
No,
games?
no,
You just
no,
left
I
it.
didn't fix. Yeah, well, it wasn't something that I felt needed fixing. It was just
It was just
like,
something that was.
yeah, it's just something that's how it was. But like, if I try to justify and think about it, it just seems silly because because those like the Warriors Orochi games, those first two are so very, very similar to each other. But Castlevania the Symphony of the Night is a completely like different type of game altogether. So
Okay, I
yeah.
would like to. We can explore this list more, but I would like to ask you to cast your eyes down to rank 163. So I've got
Yeah.
three here. 160 rank 163, which is actually 162 because it starts from number 2. But whatever. 163,
Yeah.
164, 165. 3 games. One of them's a FIFA.
Yeah.
Delta Force
So,
Extreme is, as you can imagine from the Delta Force series, it's very, very similar to Blackhawk Down. It's worse, in my opinion. Whatever. I didn't have any nostalgia attachment to it. That's why it's so low. Fantastic. FIFA 13 is a
yeah.
game that I played a lot, and I played that while I was out in Russia. Again, it's a game that I don't have too much nostalgia for. I can't explain it. I just don't. Hotel
Yeah.
Giant is a game actually that I have a lot of nostalgia for. The story behind this game is amazing, and I don't know if you know what Hotel Giant is.
I've never heard of it.
Hotel Giant. Well, I don't blame you, and especially when you find out how I got it. So Hotel Giant is a game where you design your own hotel. It's got an isometric view. You get to partition rooms and decorate the rooms with furniture. That's the premise,
Right.
I think. And there are challenges. It's kind of like Sim City, I believe, or like kind of like any kind of tycoon game where you're making money. There is rudimentary AI and so on. Now, Hotel Giant, a friend of mine, when I was still in primary school, or maybe secondary, no, when I must have been secondary school, I had my own computer, so this was after 2005. A friend of mine wanted to go for a bike ride, so we cycled over to Windsor. So Windsor's near Slough. It's on just like a one. You have to just ride through a park and you get to Windsor. And we went into a game shop, and I had very limited funds on me. I think I had £2, and I bought Hotel Giant for 50p. It was a PC game. I installed it, and we both immediately decided that it was dreadful. It wasn't worth the 50p that I paid for it, and it kind of stayed on my desk. Then a few weeks later, I was bored by my computer, so I booted up Hotel Giant. I loaded it, and I found it extremely funny to put. I think this is everyone who's played Sims knows this. To just react very, very aggressively when the AI tells you, gives you a challenge. So, for example, I designed my one of my corridors. I was playing the games completely seriously. I designed one of my corridors. There were 6 rooms either side of a corridor. At the one end, there was a elevator. At the other end, a lift. At the other end, there was a vending machine, because I knew that AI like a vending machine within such and such a distance. And one of the AI said there aren't enough vending machines. So I filled his room with vending machines. I just got really furious, and I blocked him in his room because of the vending machines, and I got not a game over, but I got like a really bad review from him because he couldn't get out of his room, and presumably he died or something. I don't know. But that's just a game that I have loads of nostalgia for, because it was bad, but I had a lot of fun with it. Why it's better than FIFA 13 and Delta Force Extreme, I'm not entirely sure, but there's a fun nostalgic story there behind that.
You made me think of do you ever play Theme Park World?
No, is it similar to Roller Coaster Tycoon?
I guess so. I think it's
Uh-huh.
I think it's probably I've not played Roller Coaster Tycoon, but I think Roller Coaster Tycoon's probably better. Theme Park World's probably like a more casual version, I imagine.
Okay.
But it was one of the first uh it was one of the first PS2 games I got. Actually, fun fact, the place, although it's all changed now, it's a different like company, everything, but the place where I first saw it was in a shop that is currently the place I work. So that's
Ah,
interesting.
okay.
But yeah, in that there's like this creature. I think it's meant to be like an ant. It's like this little Scottish ant that pops up in the corner, and he just complains about like, oh, you need more of these. Oh, you've got a problem. It's a bit dirty. You need some more cleaners. Oh, you need to hire some mechanics. But the thing is that no matter what you did, like every 10 seconds, he'd pop up and complain about something
Oh dear.
all the time, just constantly.
It just reminds me of Microsoft Word and Clippy.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair comparison. So, do you want to talk about Final Fantasy VIII? Is it time?
No, I wanted to
Oh,
finish about FIFA.
all right, okay.
So I think I misunderstood or misremembered what you were talking about before, but I have all of these FIFAs that I've played. These are all of the FIFAs that I've played. and I've ranked them in this order. Not just that one FIFA is better than the other. I believe in general that the FIFA series are all extremely similar. They're just football games. Somebody who doesn't like football will just dismiss them as, oh, that's a football game. Brilliant. They do get better incrementally. Sometimes they take steps back. But the reason, largely, for the most part, the reason is nostalgia. What I was doing while I was playing those games, or where I was in my life, how positive a feeling I get when I think back to those games. That's the reason for the ranking. But also FIFA 16, why that's the best one is because that's the one that I got modding tools for, and I actually modded that game for my own personal use, and that kind of generated the most nostalgia. Anyway, also strange that in my notes I said FIFA 11 is the best, and in my top, Fran from 2018 said it was FIFA 16 that was the best. Anyway, whatever. We can move on to the showpiece section of this call.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VIII. I think. Would you like to start first of all, or would you like me to start?
You can start.
Okay. So, even though it's, I think, abundantly clear by now to anybody who knows me that Final Fantasy VIII is important to me, or anybody who is aware that I have a connection with the video games, knows that Final Fantasy VIII is very important. To the point that even my wife, who doesn't play video games, never played video games really, she could probably count the number of games she played on her hands, or on one hand even. Even she's playing Final Fantasy VIII now. That's how monumental it is for me. But the strongest nostalgia I feel for anything in the Final Fantasy series is the Maka reactor from Final Fantasy VII, simply because I had a disc that was broken, and all I could do is experience the introduction to Final Fantasy VII up until the first boss fight. And I think just after the first boss fight, the game would crash. And so Maka Reactor, the piece of music from Final Fantasy VII, the track, triggers this nostalgia, but also kind of like the visuals of the Maka Reactor, and even, to be honest, using bells in music. So if a piece of music has like strong use of bells, even that will kind of trigger this memory. So what about you? What is the strongest kind of bit of nostalgia for, let's say, the Final Fantasy series, or Final Fantasy VIII in particular?
Well, I would say that if we're talking about like my ranking of the Final Fantasy series, I would say 8 is around the top. I think there's a few I'd put above 8 in terms of like quality of game, but 8 was my first one, and so there are some strong memories. I did mention before about that time I was sat in the back room with the rug and the hot chocolate. So that's a strong memory. But and as you know, I've mentioned it before, but the track Fear, because I borrowed disc 1 from a friend, and he borrowed As Your Dreams from me. And it broke as soon as you left Balam Garden, so I was sort of stuck there. But I was really, because before this he had showed me a few clips. I think the first clip that I saw of it was during the Nog sequence, and I didn't understand what was going on. I just knew that he fought Gratz every so often, and because I was familiar with Pokemon and As Your Dreams, when he carded the enemies, in my mind, it's like, right, so that's like you getting more GFs.
Yep.
So I was trying to like make sense of it. And so I was just like enamored with it. I was like, I want this game. Which, you know, to be honest, that happened quite a lot. There were a few games where he showed me it and I'd be like, just enraptured by it. I know I'm going a bit off topic here, but I have to mention the time he showed me Croc Legend of the Gobbos, and I was so excited to potentially get it that I couldn't sit still downstairs. I ended up headbutting the settee because I was just so excited.
It's adorable.
Yeah, and it's like, it's so weird looking back to that now. But yeah, Final Fantasy VIII was definitely the biggest example of this. And it was just amazing to play Final Fantasy 8 because I tell you, I had this image of Final Fantasy 8 in my mind. I don't know if you had this, and I suppose I still kind of do, but it seems special to me in that it felt more classy, I
Hmm.
suppose. Did you get that?
It felt more classy.
Yeah.
Well, for me, actually, something that, okay, this is actually quite minor. I don't think I've thought about this for many years, but that is that my dad really likes classical music. And if Final Fantasy VIII was playing and I wasn't in a battle where there would be like sound effects and all that kind of thing, like of striking enemies or casting magic, if it was just somewhere where there is music playing, he actually approved of it. He would actually look, he'd see us
Right.
playing video games and he'd be, if video games were quite taboo, we weren't supposed to play them. But he'd see that we were playing a video game, but because the video game had such classy music in his eyes, compared to, the nonsense like Pokemon, where it sounds like a video game, he actually
Yeah.
approved of it.
Yeah. I felt like it, I tell you, I suppose Final Fantasy 8 is quite themed in academia, not
Hmm.
just in the sense that, Balam Garden and all that, but I would also say that in the sense that the different like options in the game, the different menu options sort of resemble like chemical formula, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So, like GFHP and some mag
Uh-huh.
and RF for refine and all that.
Yes.
Uh, it all felt very like advanced. And it's well, no, it doesn't remind me, but like currently it makes me think of just that random time as a kid. I woke up in the middle of the night and went downstairs. Like I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs and turned the TV on, and there was this program about like GCSE revision,
Uh-huh.
and it was like a science thing, and it seemed like quite like, ooh, this is quite like advanced and
Hmm.
like scientific and stuff. And I think with Final Fantasy 8, because like like I said, I did play Pokemon, and actually, As Your Dreams is also classy in a way. Um, but I don't know. I think it's just the fact that it was it was turn-based battles, but because it was on a console rather than like a Game Boy, like Pokemon was, it felt like it was like more serious, and it felt, I suppose, advanced might not be the word, but I did sort of feel like it was quite advanced, and so I just sort of felt like this is not just like you know a game where you load it up and you go through a level. I knew there was like story going on, and
Hmm.
I sort of felt like the whole pacing of there being like cutscenes and just these areas where there wasn't any fighting or anything, it all made it feel like, not to sound cliche, but quite a piece of art.
Hmm. Yeah.
Does this resonate with you at all?
Oh yeah. Um, again, this is fantastic difference between your experience of video games, I think, in general, and mine is that when I started video games, I was an observer. I just watched, and so Final Fantasy for me to begin with was a movie. And the
Right.
biggest reward, because I watched my brothers play, and that was that. I wasn't allowed. I didn't have a choice. But it was between, watching them play video games and not doing anything, or playing with my own toys, which were boring in comparison. Uh,
Yeah.
but even still, Final Fantasy was more like a movie. And I recall actually when I did start playing, or uh, when we got to. Because it was like this, that my oldest brother played, but he didn't know what to do, or maybe he got bored at a certain point during disc three. And then when I started from scratch, well, I started, my other brother started from scratch. We got to the final, we got to Ultimisia's castle, and we failed because we were too weak. We couldn't beat her, and I think he started again. He got to the end, or he went to a previous save, and got a bit stronger. Came back, And for me, the motivation for playing that game or for watching him was to get to the final film because I heard the final film was like 10 minutes long. It's just like, oh, it's going to be magical, and
Yeah,
that was the motivation. So it was like a work of art. It was like multimedia. It wasn't just it
yeah,
wasn't just like my parents imagine video games is just Pong, but just more time is wasted because
yeah,
you get bored of Pong quickly. Uh, Whereas all of a sudden, games aren't just Pong but longer. They are they are more similar to what they would actually enjoy as adults. Obviously, if the theme of Final Fantasy VIII wasn't just like a school and it wasn't very childish in some respects, but I'm sure my parents have inadvertently listened to the entire Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack over the years, and they don't complain. So I
I
think it is classy.
actually, yeah, I think I've got like a memory that just came back to me, a Final Fantasy memory, uh, and I suppose even though probably to a lesser extent, like you were saying, like with your brother playing it, and you weren't able to play it, that's sort like obviously a much lesser extent than to me. Uh, Obviously for me it's a much lesser extent than it is for you. But it was like my friend had the game, so he was playing it. So it was kind of like I was watching, but I was asking him, and I suppose I would have probably been like older at an older age when I saw
Hmm.
it than you were. But I was asking like, oh, what does this mean? What does this thing in the menu mean? What does
Hmm.
that number mean? And all that. I remember it was 1999, and I was no, I think it was 2000 actually. And it was the early part of the year, so I was 11, and we were about to go on holiday to Mallorca for a week. And I remember the way that my brother's room was arranged at the time, and I had watched him play this game like every so often. And at one point, he was on disc three. And see, this is another thing that made me think this game is like big and classy is the fact that it was four
Yeah,
discs, which is huge.
yeah.
Um, and I remember this is when we discussed the whole thing of, um, I mean, maybe it might have been different. Maybe my memories aren't completely aligned because I think under this circumstance he wouldn't have lent me disc one, but probably a bit earlier than us going away to Mallorca. I'm not too sure, but I remember he let me play it like at my house, and he we were in my brother's bedroom, and I started it. I started the game, and then he like took over, and then he went to save, and you can probably see where this is going. He saved it on stop one, and I said, "Isn't that your save file?" And then and then he and then he threw the controller on the floor, walked into my room, and just cried.
Oh,
Uh,
oh,
yeah,
oh, that's
yeah,
so sad.
I know. It's a sad memory.
Hmm.
But uh, trying to come back into happier memories, I borrowed disc one as he borrowed As Your Dreams, as you know, and I remember that over the time I was borrowing it, we went away to Mallorca for a week, and
Hmm.
so I played like a little bit before we went. And when we were at Mallorca, I remember being like in the hotel room and like being on the balcony and stuff. And in my mind, I'd be thinking about Final Fantasy VIII, and I'd be
Hmm.
thinking of Azure Dreams. And because this was like my first proper introduction to RPGs beyond like just Pokemon. I mean, I sounds like I'm putting Pokemon down, but Pokemon was like a big pivotal
Hmm.
moment for me. But
Yes.
I'm not talking about that right now. Um, and I'd sort of come up with like game design ideas for like, well, what if you had like this sort of creature and you had like this sort of element and everything, and it was all based on just Final Fantasy VIII and Azure Dreams, just these ideas of these two games
Hmm.
together in some sort of way to make the ultimate game.
Yes. So I think you mentioned before that you didn't quite understand what Final Fantasy VIII was, and in your mind you were already kind of exploring perhaps what it could be, and you were getting excited about it. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that definitely before I played it, I sort of just like assumed things because I didn't really
Yeah,
understand.
and
But
that
I
was, for example, the GFs.
yeah, like the
Hmm.
carding them to get the GFs,
Yeah.
and I just sort of I mean, but I understood that I didn't understand a lot of things. Um, and so when I did play it, I started because all I could do was play cards and go to the training area. And I remember making a big deal about getting forbidden cards. Because I
Hmm.
remember thinking, oh, forbidden, they've got like a 6 on the top and a 6 on the right. That's really good to put them in a corner. I remember,
I had the same strategy.
really?
Yeah.
With forbiddens?
No, not
But,
not necessarily Forbiddens. For me, it was Galas because I had a 4 and a 4 right at the beginning, and
right.
you could put that in a corner. But generally speaking, yeah, I had the same kind of
Yeah, yeah.
belief.
Just like ultra defensive
Yep.
maneuver. Yeah, it was. And so, like, my entire focus was just training in the training area, getting cards. And I remember like asking him like, "Oh, how do you use party abilities?" Not realizing that they were passive and
Hmm.
all that. Just wondering these different things. Uh, and like when I think back to this memory, no, I was gonna no, that's different. I was gonna say that I remember I was playing like Rayman at the I mean, I played Rayman before Final Fantasy VIII, but I was playing Rayman after this time as well. That when I got it for my 12th, because I actually got Final Fantasy VIII for my 12th birthday in 2000. And I remember playing like Rayman at the same time. So uh, those memories, those memories sort of overlap there.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
So I wanted to ask a question because I did
uh,
this a lot when I was growing up, and then I also should highlight if somebody's listening that hadn't listened to a previous episode talk. I think Devon and I are very different in what we understand or how we connect with video games. What I think interests you the most is the mechanics, how it works, and learning how it works, and playing it, and enjoying the gameplay. For me, Final Fantasy VIII was the story, the music, the characters. I really enjoyed those when I was younger, and the gameplay was secondary. For a very long time, I didn't particularly care about Junction. I was the kind of person that I didn't use Junction at all when I was playing it with my brother when I was very young. And then I just set everything to auto because I didn't want to think about it. I didn't even bother teaching GFs anything aside from boost. And and it was only much later that I actually realized, hang on, the gameplay here is actually quite quirky. And then you learn that you can abuse it and you can become extremely powerful really early on. So my emotional connection is partly into the memories, the circumstances, but especially to the story, the music, and the characters. And when I was a kid, I just dreamt that I could forget it all, that I could just forget that I had ever played Final Fantasy VIII and just learn it and experience it again. Discover the characters, discover the settings, the visuals, the story, and the music, especially. Did you ever have anything like that? Maybe not necessarily Final Fantasy VIII, but did you ever, as a kid, wish that you could completely erase something from your memory just to experience the joy of learning it all again?
maybe I can't remember. I do remember there were some times where did you okay, this kind of links, but did you have it when you were younger, sort of not fully coming to grips with the idea that things were limited, like things didn't just go on forever? Because when I think of like old games and like Sonic the Head, like going back to Sonic the Hedgehog, right? I remember uh being like playing my uncle's Mega Drive before it became my Mega Drive. Um, and I think he might have told me like a cheat or something, or I don't know, but there was like a cheat code you could put in so you could like select a level.
Hmm.
I remember doing that, and obviously I remember going to like the final zone and seeing what the final boss fight was like and everything. But it was sort of like a lesson for me to learn that games ended. There
Uh-huh.
wasn't just like a continuous stream of more stuff there to go through.
Hmm. Well, I I don't know actually. For me, Final Fantasy VIII is just such a definitive for a lot of my childhood. Final Fantasy VIII was the essence of a video game. Was what video games all should
Yeah.
aspire to be, and that had a film at the end of it. After the film ends, you can only go back to a previous save, and so that was very conclusive. And so no, I don't think I did experience the same.
So how old were you when you first like had these experiences with this particular game?
Uh, well, my memory's quite murky. Um, I recall that when we played Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX was already out, but then the difference between those two isn't too great. So
Right.
I think it must have been 2001, or maybe 2001, 2002 even. My uncle had a PlayStation 2, and I remember playing SSX and having my mind blown, and that was roughly the same time. So I think, yeah, maybe 2002. So I would have been
Right.
9 years old at the time.
Okay. So not that much younger than me then, because I think I was 11 when I got it for my 12th birthday, and I think I would have been 11 when I first like saw it.
Hmm.
But it's like my my bread and butter, as it were, when it comes to games. As you know, is these like Japanese RPGs and all that. That's like
Hmm.
my main thing. And up until Pokemon, I mean, it seems like not long now when you think about. I got my Game Boy for my 10th birthday, so Pokemon I probably would have been 11, I'm guessing.
Hmm.
So it seems rather compact. And I got my Amiga, I think I was 5, so maybe like 5 or 6 years before I really discovered RPGs.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it seems trivial now, but in my mind, there was this huge like portion of my life, like pre-RPGs.
Hmm. Yeah.
It seems strange.
But I think that kind of maybe that's why you believe. I don't know. Were the games that you played on the Amiga and before you played RPGs, were they kind of I don't know if with were they particularly difficult? Were you able to complete them? Were you able to finish all the missions? Because if you had this idea that you got to like a very difficult part, but the game continued, that could perhaps explain why you believe that all games just went on forever.
I managed to complete. Um, so Sonic 1, I think that was like the first Mega Drive game I played. So prior to that, it was all just Amiga.
Hmm.
And in terms of Amiga, I had plenty of games because we had them all like, pirated and all that.
Hmm.
I had loads of games, and I managed to complete maybe two of them, I think. I think Rodland and The Addams Family,
Uh-huh.
which The Addams Family is a hard game. But
I
I think I
can't.
managed.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's
I
it's
didn't realize
dead.
there was a game.
It's a platformer, but it's like incredibly slippery, and the enemies are like so a lot of them fly and they're very fast.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but I did manage to complete it, and Rodland as well, which is a different kind of game. But yeah, I sort of didn't really complete many games.
Given the opportunity to forget the experience of ever having played Final Fantasy VIII or any other game that you have a strong emotional attachment to, would you do what I wanted as a kid and erase your memory of that just so that you can experience it again?
I would, under the condition that I could opt in to having that memory back.
Uh huh. Okay.
So I would temporarily lose the experience, lose the memory, and then
Hmm.
I can get it back again.
And I think I understand why. Nostalgia being the biggest thing, right? As
I
in,
suppose so. I suppose so, but I think I think I just put a lot of value on knowing a lot of things in the games I really like, I suppose.
uh huh. Well,
Yeah,
what I what I think first of all is nostalgia shrouds my experiences with video games. Everything that I've played, even something that I played last week. Let's say I played something new. I don't know. Hearts of Iron 2. No, Hearts of Iron 2 I started playing in 2017, I think. But let's say any game I install on my phone, immediately I have some kind of emotional attachment to it. And should I erase this memory going back to Final Fantasy 8, especially now that I'm an adult, and now that there have been several iterations of idiot Fran, and now I'm current Fran. Current Fran's better than previous Fran. Um, my experience with this video game will be vastly different, and I won't have those same emotions that I can fall back on because I think I said I said nostalgia can be quite cruel or can be quite dangerous, but for the most part, it's just free good emotions, depending on how well you can
yeah,
control it. And so I wouldn't want to get rid of those feelings just to build new ones.
yeah,
Maybe that's part of growing up that I just simply accept that these are twisted memories, that these aren't, or distorted memories, let's say. I
yeah,
accept that these are distorted memories, that I'm looking at everything through rose tinted glasses, and that it was great through the eyes of, 9-year-old me and, subsequent years that I played it. But I wouldn't want to erase all of that just to experience it again, because maybe I experience it again and I just think, oh, that's a video game, and then I just move on to something else.
yeah. I don't. What was I going to say? I've lost track of what I was going to say.
Sorry.
It's all right.
So
Uh, yeah,
if it comes back, interrupt me, okay? But I wanted to kind of link this to something we've already mentioned, and that is remakes
yeah.
and using nostalgia to sell things, because obviously everything's
Yeah,
everything
I
everything's about
remember.
money. Okay, go go
I
go.
remember. Yeah, so I think nostalgia is great. I think it's really good to be able to like. I think there's a value in being able to pinpoint memories in a way so that you can say. And sometimes, for example, it might require a bit more thought. Like you might remember, oh, when I was younger, I played this game, and you're not quite sure the year, but you think back, like you look up when a certain game was released or what you else you were doing at the time, and you match it up, and you've got like those memories, and it becomes part of like the story of your life. But I think even without that, just having the knowledge of how games work is a valuable thing to have. Um, so say if someone like with Final Fantasy, say if someone's like they're loading up for the first time, right, and they're playing through it for the first time. I don't want to be like backseat game. I want to be like, oh, you shouldn't do this. You should do this, or and do all that. But I think it's valuable that the fact that I have the knowledge that like if they ask me a question, I can answer it, or I can ask them a question, and just sort of I don't know. I think just purely on the fact that I like games and that there's games that I like, I just like knowing that the information is there in my brain
Hmm.
because it's something it's information I can appreciate.
And I think it's especially important considering you actually make games, considering you could use the experiences, good or bad, with all sorts of games that you've played, which will
Yeah,
help inform you when you have to make design choices.
it's interesting sometimes when I forget certain things in Level Up Land. Like there's a few things, like one thing, like okay, two examples that I can think of is for one, I often forget that repair in Level Up 1 heals 100 shield rather than 50. Sometimes I think it's 50, like no, it's 100.
Uh-huh.
And in Level Up Land 2, bases 12 and 13, I know where they are and what they look like and what they're called, but sometimes in my mind I will swap the numbers. So like 12 is 13 and 13 is 12.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, and interesting, I think.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm curious as to why that happens, but it's very
I don't know.
strange. It's a
Right.
bug. You need to get that patched.
In my brain.
So, uh,
Yeah.
talking about remakes, remakes are a fantastic way to pull some levers, tickle people's nostalgia with a very long stick, and earn a lot of money while doing it. So, Final Fantasy VIII Remake, thoughts, concerns, ideas, suggestions. Eventually, do you need a bucket for vomit?
Do I need to, what, just like the idea of it being
Yeah,
remade?
yeah.
Is that what you're thinking? No, I tell you, sometimes, um, I suppose, in a way, you could say I'm quite a purist. Like, if like they change something around, it's like this thing isn't representative of the game.
Hmm.
Like Final Fantasy One has come out in a few different locations, and this is one
Yes.
thing I very much appreciate about the pixel remasters is that they are definitely a lot closer to the originals than the other, like the PSP version is. So like I'll see the PSP version, and it's like there's so many um what's like liberties taken. Like they'll add all this extra content. Like with the zoo, these extra dungeons. Like once you defeat the final boss with optional content and extra weapons and all that. But also, you level up loads faster. You can save anywhere. MP is different to the original game, and it's like,
Hmm.
well, this isn't. I
This
don't
isn't Final
know.
Fantasy One.
Yeah, it's just there's so much of it that it just isn't
Hmm.
like what the game is, and I think sometimes I think to myself things should like if they're going to like remake or remaster again, whatever, things should be maybe altered in as much as like bugs are fixed, or but then I suppose you could say that the bugs are part of the identity of the game as well, couldn't you?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but
So,
like yeah,
no, please continue.
um, so I was just yeah. So if we're talking about Final Fantasy VIII, um, see, well, again, and this is something I'd be very conflicted over, but a big thing I don't like about Final Fantasy VIII, and I've never liked it in any game that has it, and I don't really know many, is the level scaling. I
Hmm.
just, it's just bizarre and weird that you have to like avoid fighting to
Yes.
get against levels and all that. So I would think that if I was put in charge of like
This
designing,
is exactly what I was going to get into. But
right,
finish your
okay,
thought, and then I was gonna want to ask you some quick fire questions. But yeah,
right.
finish your thought.
If I was to get if I was to be given the role of like redesigning like a remake or remaster or whatever, one of my big focuses would be right, the leveling system. What I would do is I would make it so that enemies don't scale with you, but leveling has a very weak effect or a very like it happens very slowly. But then
Hmm.
I suppose you could say, well, what about level five death? That's going to affect that part of the game, and there's lots of other things to consider, and I don't know. Right.
So, first of all, I was going to say I want to mention. Okay, I'll bring up some kind of gameplay feature or graphical feature or sound feature or anything, and you just tell me whether we scrap it, change it, and or suggest scrap it, keep it, or change it in some way, and you can suggest a change. Okay.
Okay.
So the first one, level scaling, you've already said. So you'd scrap level scaling, but you'd be careful about what you implement instead.
Yeah.
Okay. 2D environments or 3D environments, in the sense that do you have 2D rendered backgrounds that are, in 8K perfect quality, or do you go for a full 3D world?
Mm, I, oh. That's a tough one. I think I tried to keep it similar, but I think a lot of people find this is that a lot of places like Delling City, for example, the perspective changes so much that
Hmm.
you can never tell where you are. And Esther's like that as well.
Yeah, but I think that was intentional. I think Esther's really, especially Lunatic Pandora, that is just intentionally really quirky, and the space station as well. That's intentionally really confusing. And I know it's
Yeah,
difficult for kids to navigate their way around. I mean, how many times did we get lost in Esther? But
yeah. I mean,
I think,
even for adults, I think it's difficult to get around.
and I think it's also pre-rendered backgrounds are fantastic because they um, they mean that you don't have to be able to explore every nook and cranny, and it's kind of like a natural limit to
Yeah.
how in depth they have to make the world. And I don't think so. I haven't played the Final Fantasy VII remake. I don't have a place. I don't own a PlayStation 4 or a PlayStation 5. But I imagine walking through one Midgar train station is going to be the same as walking through all of them. And I imagine if they have designed five Midgar train stations or something that you're able to go in, it's going to be largely the same experience. I don't know how much that's adding
Yeah.
to the game. So why not just have one which is done very well and limit how far you can go? And I think it is quite linear, if I'm not mistaken. This number seven
Yeah.
remake. But the point is, I don't know if rendering Esther in full 3D and allowing you to go anywhere, or at least go walk on the skyways, and they would have to do so much kind of design work, and I just think it's unnecessary. But then again, I'm a prisoner to nostalgia, so what do I know? Okay, next one. GF animations or GF summons. Do you scrap them? Do you change them? I'm sorry, you may have heard a cat screech, and my wife tried to shush them. Sorry about that. GF animations. You know how when you summon a GF, you have to sit through an animation. I've got a message. Connection lost. Oh dear. Hello.
Hi.
I have no idea what happened there.
All right.
So what was the
Did
last thing you heard? Because I carried on talking. You'll get
right.
this all in the
Did it
recording.
did the recording at all?
No, no, the recording's continued.
All right. Okay.
So
You were just
you just heard me
y
talking to myself.
right. Yeah. You were just saying about Esther.
Yeah, so Esther, they would have to, even if you're only allowed to walk on the what do you call it, the gangways or whatever, the airways, whatever.
Yeah.
Even if you're not allowed to walk on the ground, they would still have to just design so much of the city that isn't particularly necessary, and so they
Yeah.
can use perspectives to their advantage, and avoid doing that, which I think is
Yeah.
fantastic.
To make it clear that this is a different place to that other place,
Yeah.
just because the camera's at a different angle. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think? Pre-rendered backgrounds, you're not so sure? Scrap,
Actually,
keep,
I'd say
change.
probably keep. Probably keep.
Okay, keep. Next one. What was the one I was about to ask? Oh yeah, GF animations. So you summon a GF, you have to sit through 30 seconds or up to 2 minutes or up to a minute and a half of animations. Then some damage is dealt, and then you can select your next. Then you can continue, with the ATB. Would you change, keep, scrap?
See, I would have to keep that because I think that the animation length is part of the balancing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's it's inefficient in the time it's.
Hello. Okay, I'm afraid we're having connection issues. I don't think it's my end. I was worried for a moment that the cat may have stepped on the. We have an extension cable on the floor which has a very big on-off switch, and that has happened before that the cat has just simply stepped on the on-off switch and turned off the. You back? Hello?
You're back.
Are you back?
I'm
I was explaining how the cat sometimes is able to switch off our internet. Uh,
right.
I don't think it's my end. I think it might be yours.
Oh,
Or Messenger itself. I don't
okay.
know.
I don't know. Well, we should probably get like wrapping this up because it's quite long anyway.
So maybe we can leave this for another time. This quick fire get rid of. Just quickly, you were going to say you'd keep the GF animations because.
Yeah, because anyone who's not a noob would know not to summon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. This has been really, really entertaining. This is something that I feel I can contribute a lot to. I think I might have to finish on my own. I'm not sure how this is gonna work. Okay, we're going again. Hello.
Hi. Should we end this here, do you
Yeah,
think?
just go quickly. We can finish very quickly now. Thank you very much. It was very, very fun. I enjoyed actually being able to contribute a lot more than I usually feel I do. Perhaps it's just my imagination. And we're gone again. So, thanks very much. I think we may have to finish. I have no idea what's going on. Before it breaks, quickly say bye. Hello? Oh, this has not gone well.
I'm back.
Yeah, quickly say bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.